The email arrived at 5:23 p.m. on a Friday. Coward's hour. Drop the grenade. Then disappear before the shrapnel hits. Subject line re. Managing Director promotion. Committee decision. I didn't open it immediately. Let it sit there in my inbox, bold and throbbing like a bruise that hasn't finished forming. I'm Eleanor Vance, 51 years old, and I've been navigating Wall Street politics long enough to taste betrayal before I see it. Took a sip of my tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, same as I've drunk since my days at the Federal Reserve. Looked around the trading floor of Archer Wellington Partners, our mid-sized investment bank in Midtown Manhattan. To my left, the junior analysts were ordering bottle service for their Friday celebration, congratulating themselves on a deal they barely understood. To my right, the interns were taking selfies with the Bloomberg terminals, posting about grinding and hustle culture while their trust funds did the actual heavy lifting. 23 years I've been doing this job. 23 years as senior portfolio strategist. That means I'm the woman who builds the investment models that the boys in pinstripes present to clients. I make sure our risk calculations don't blow up in our faces like they did in 2008. I'm the engine room of a ship full of captains who can't read a compass. 15 years at the Fed taught me patience. You don't flinch at volatility. You wait for the correction. I clicked the email. Dear Eleanor, thank you for your continued dedication during the Managing Director review process. Your analytical contributions have been instrumental to Archer Wellington's success. However, after thorough evaluation of leadership competencies and cultural alignment factors, the committee has selected an alternative candidate. We believe fresh perspectives will drive innovation in our wealth management division. Let's connect next quarter to discuss your ongoing professional development. Warm regards, Brittany Morrison, Chief People Officer. Fresh perspectives. Brittany was 34 years old, daughter of our CEO Charles Morrison, and she had just handed my promotion to her Wharton roommate. Some woman named Madison, who'd been here exactly 14 months and thought risk management meant not ordering the fish at client dinners. This was the fourth year running. 2021, market uncertainty. 2022, organizational restructuring. 2023, leadership pipeline development. 2024, cultural alignment factors. Meanwhile, Brittany had just approved a $300,000 retention package for a junior trader who'd lost the firm $11 million on a single currency bet last quarter. I knew because I was the one who unwound the position at 3 a.m. before the Asian markets opened. I didn't scream, didn't fire off an angry reply, didn't throw my keyboard through the glass wall. I'm a professional. Something cold settled in my chest, like ice forming on a lake. Clarity. They thought I was furniture, a reliable fixture they could overlook indefinitely. They assumed that because I didn't play golf with clients, because I didn't laugh at Charles's terrible jokes, because I wore sensible shoes instead of Louboutins, that I had no leverage. These executives had more confidence than competence. I looked at the celebration happening on the trading floor. They were popping champagne over the Hartwell family office deal, the crown jewel, a $68 million wealth management mandate, the deal that was going to put Archer Wellington on the map, the deal that paid for Charles's Hampton house and Brittany's apartment renovation. It was also a deal I had structured, not the dinners or the handshakes or the country club memberships. I built the actual investment strategy, the portfolio allocation model, the tax optimization framework, the estate planning integration, the 53-page investment policy statement that made old money trust new managers. I wrote the formulas, every calculation, every assumption, every risk parameter, and more importantly, I remembered the compensation agreement I'd signed 19 years ago. Back when Archer Wellington was a boutique firm running out of a cramped office on Water Street, back when they couldn't afford to pay me what Goldman was offering, back when I was foolish enough to accept promises instead of cash. But I wasn't foolish about contracts. The Fed taught me that. Read everything, question everything, document obsessively. The compensation agreement had a clause. Article 4, Section 7, buried in legal language that would make an accountant's eyes water. I'd negotiated that clause myself. Inserted it at 2 a.m. when the founders were desperate and exhausted and willing to agree to anything to get a former Fed analyst on their letterhead. Like any good banker, I always protected my downside. I stood up, my hip clicked. Reminder that I'm not 30 anymore and probably shouldn't spend 12 hours a day in an ergonomic chair that isn't. Walked past the champagne celebration. Eleanor, come have a drink. It's Friday, one of the associates shouted. Glass raised. I gave him a polite nod. Enjoy your weekend, Trevor. Headed to my private office, one of the few perks of seniority, a room with a door that closes and walls that don't broadcast every conversation. The office smelled like old coffee and printer toner, a museum of 23 years of work, framed credentials on the wall that nobody reads anymore. CFA Charter, Series 7, Series 66, MBA from Chicago. I opened my filing cabinet. Physical files, old school. Most people keep everything in the cloud now, but some documents need to exist on paper, with real signatures, where they can't be conveniently deleted during a system migration. Pulled out a manila folder labeled Original Employment Documents, 2005. Inside my compensation and intellectual property agreement, flipped to page 11. Article 4, Section 7. Ran my finger over the text. Small font, dense paragraphs, the kind of legal language that makes people skip to the signature page. In recognition of employees' proprietary methodologies and analytical frameworks developed prior to employment, employee retains perpetual ownership rights to any investment model, risk algorithm, or portfolio construction system created substantially by employee. Employer is granted exclusive license to utilize said intellectual property for commercial purposes. In the event that licensed intellectual property generates gross revenue exceeding $50 million annually, employees shall receive ongoing compensation equal to 1.8% of gross revenue derived from products or services substantially based on said intellectual property. This provision survives termination of employment and requires employees' written consent for modification. I read it 3 times. Then a fourth, 1.8% of gross revenue. Our flagship product, the Wellington allocation model, was derived entirely from formulas I developed at the Fed and refined during my first 5 years here. The risk parity framework, the factor exposure optimization, the dynamic rebalancing algorithm. Everything that differentiated us from 1,000 other wealth managers came from my spreadsheets. Last year, products based on the Wellington model generated $47 million in revenue. This year was projected at $62 million. Next year, with the Hartwell mandate, probably $80 million. 1.8% of $80 million is $1.44 million, plus 19 years of back payments, with interest. My attorney would need to run the exact numbers, but we were talking about something north of $6 million. I closed the folder. The silence in my office was electric with possibility. Professional development opportunities. Brittany, my professional development was right here, hiding in plain sight, compounding quietly for 19 years. I wasn't going to beg for another review cycle. I wasn't going to play politics or network my way into a sympathy promotion. I was going to teach them about reading contracts before they sign them. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled the careers of everyone who had ever dismissed me, do me a quick favor. If you enjoy stories about Wall Street executives getting destroyed by the women they underestimate, hit that subscribe button. It feeds my cold, calculating soul. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this particular trade settles. Now, where was I? Right. I had a contract worth millions, and a firm full of executives who had no idea it existed. Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm Eleanor Vance. I'm the Senior Portfolio Strategist at Archer Wellington Partners. The title sounds prestigious, and it is, technically. But what it really means is that I'm the woman who does the math while everyone else takes the meetings. My job is simple. I build investment strategies. I create models that turn rich people into richer people without accidentally making them poor people. For 23 years, I've been the invisible architect of this firm's success. Not glamorous, not flashy, but profitable. The office smells like money and anxiety. Expensive cologne, stale coffee, and the particular tension of people whose bonuses depend on basis points. Wall Street in its natural habitat. While the rest of the firm is obsessed with client dinners and deal tombstones, I'm back here in the quant cave making sure the numbers actually work. I'm the reason the Hartwell family trusts us with their fortune. I'm the reason we passed 4 consecutive compliance audits without findings. I'm the reason our risk-adjusted returns beat the benchmark for 11 straight years. And I'm the only person who truly understands how our investment models work. The Wellington allocation model isn't just software. It's a philosophy, a mathematical framework for balancing risk and return that I developed over 15 years at the Federal Reserve. I brought it with me when I left, refined it during late nights when everyone else had gone home, built it into something that generates tens of millions in management fees every year. Every assumption, every parameter, every line of logic flows from work I did before this firm even existed. The executives don't understand this. They see performance charts and client presentations. They don't see the Monte Carlo simulations, the covariance matrices, the optimization algorithms that make those charts possible. But Charles Morrison understood one thing. He understood that 19 years ago, I was the only person who could build what he needed, and he would have signed anything to get it. The compensation agreement was executed in 2005. Back when Archer Wellington was 3 people in a room with a Bloomberg terminal and a dream, Charles was the rainmaker, big personality, bigger promises, best golf handicap on the street. His partner, David Archer, was the operations guy, compliance, back office, keeping the lights on. And then there was me, the builder, the one who had to take their PowerPoint fantasies and turn them into actual investment products. They couldn't afford me. Not at market rates. I was leaving the Fed with offers from every major bank in the city, but I liked the opportunity, liked the idea of building something from scratch, liked Charles's energy, even if his quantitative skills were basically non-existent. So we negotiated. Lower base salary in exchange for equity, deferred bonuses in exchange for profit sharing, and a very specific clause about intellectual property rights. My lawyer insisted on it, smart woman. Said that if I was going to bring my Fed research to a startup, I needed to own a piece of it forever. Charles signed at midnight, exhausted, desperate, barely reading. Desperate people make expensive mistakes. The clause sat dormant for 19 years. Nobody remembered it. Nobody enforced it. The firm grew. New partners were hired. New lawyers reviewed new agreements. But nobody went back to the original documents. Nobody except me. Now, the clause was about to wake up, and it was hungry. Spent the weekend in my apartment on the Upper West Side, complete opposite of Archer Wellington's chaos. Quiet, organized, no champagne or chest bumping. Just my piano and my cat Fitzgerald, who judges everyone from his spot on the windowsill. Had the contract, now I needed the data. Article 4, Section 7 required documentation of my intellectual property contributions. The clause was specific compensation tied to products substantially based on my work. I needed to prove that the Wellington model was fundamentally my creation. Logged into our analytics platform. Model documentation going back 19 years. Every version, every update, every methodology change meticulously archived. My access level was unrestricted, not because I was a hacker. Because 12 years ago, our CTO got tired of manually approving my data requests and just gave me admin access to everything. Probably forgot he did it. People forget a lot about the quiet ones. Started pulling records. Wellington allocation model, version 1.0. Author Eleanor Vance. Date, March 2006. Version 2.0 through version 7.3. Lead developer Eleanor Vance. Contributors. None listed. Core risk parity algorithm. Original author Eleanor Vance. Derived from Federal Reserve Research, 1998 to 2005. Factor Exposure Framework. Original author Eleanor Vance. Patent pending. 2007 abandoned due to cost, but documentation preserved. I printed everything. 63 pages of evidence, time-stamped, version controlled, legally defensible. Then I pulled the revenue data. Products utilizing Wellington model. 2023. Revenue $47 million. Projected 2024, $62 million. 5-year projection with Hartwell. Mandate $350 million. Cumulative 1.8% of $350 million is $6.3 million. I sat back in my chair, looked at Fitzgerald. He looked back with complete indifference. What do you think is $6 million enough to retire on? He yawned and resumed ignoring me. Fair point. Numbers mean nothing until they clear settlement. Time to make some calls. Monday morning, 9 a.m. am sharp. Conference room 12. Just me and Brittany Morrison. She walked in wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly maintenance fees, carrying a tablet like a shield, smile that didn't reach her eyes. Eleanor, so glad we could connect. I wanted to personally follow up on the managing director decision. I know it wasn't the outcome you hoped for, but Madison really brings a fresh energy that I'm not here about the promotion. She blinked. Script interrupted. People like Brittany can't function without their scripts. Oh, what did you want to discuss? I slid a folder across the table. The folder contained 3 things. 1, a copy of my original compensation agreement from 2005. 2, a 63-page analysis of my intellectual property contributions. 3, a formal demand letter drafted by my attorney. Brittany looked at the folder like it might explode. What is this? My intellectual property rights. Specifically, Article 4, Section 7 of my compensation agreement. She opened the folder, started reading. Her face cycled through several shades of pale. This says you're entitled to royalties on Wellington model revenue. 1.8% of gross revenue, correct. But she was doing mental math, struggling. That's millions of dollars. $6.3 million, covering 19 years of accrued payments plus interest. My attorney's estimate is conservative. The color drained from her face completely. This is absurd. This clause was never enforced. It's probably expired or superseded by. It's perpetual, survives termination, cannot be modified without my written consent. Your father signed it himself. His signature is on page 14. She flipped to page 14. Stared at her father's signature. The signature of a desperate man who signed at midnight without reading. I need to speak with legal. Of course. I've already sent copies to your legal department, Jace, and to the board, and to our compliance officer. Her head snapped up. You contacted compliance. We're a registered investment advisor. Material financial liabilities must be disclosed. It's called regulatory obligation. You're trying to destroy this firm. I kept my voice level, calm as a frozen lake. I'm trying to collect compensation that I'm legally owed. Compensation that your family has ignored for 19 years while paying yourselves millions in bonuses. We didn't know. You didn't read. There's a difference. Brittany stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. My father will fight this. I hope he does. Discovery would be fascinating. All those emails about why I keep getting passed over. All those conversations about how I'm not client-facing material. A jury would find them very educational. She grabbed the folder and stormed out. Didn't say goodbye. I sat alone in the conference room, allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. The next 48 hours were chaos. I know because I watched it unfold from my office. Door closed, tea fresh, calmly reviewing portfolio allocations while the building burned around me. Hour 1. Brittany ran directly to her father's corner office. I could see her through the glass walls, arms waving like she was directing traffic. Charles's face went from confusion to disbelief to something that looked a lot like fear. Hour 3. Emergency meeting of the partners. Every managing director, every senior VP crammed into the main conference room. Lots of shouting, lots of blame shifting. Several people looking at me through the window with expressions ranging from confusion to pure hatred. Hour 7. Legal team arrived. 4 attorneys from our outside firm. They commandeered the war room and didn't emerge for 14 hours. Hour 14. Charles Morrison himself appeared at my office door, first time he'd visited my floor in probably 3 years. "Eleanor, we need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat. Charles." He sat heavily. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. The stress was already carving lines into his forehead. "This clause, in your contract, did you know about it this whole time?" "Of course. I negotiated it. And you never said anything for 19 years. You never asked. You never promoted me. You never gave me any reason to believe I'd be treated fairly through normal channels." He rubbed his temples. "We could have worked something out, if you'd just come to me directly. I came to you 4 years ago, asked for a compensation review that reflected my actual contributions. You said the partnership couldn't accommodate it. That was different. Was it Brittany got an apartment renovation stipend worth $400,000? You bought a house in the Hamptons for $6 million. But there was no budget for a 20% raise for the woman who built your entire investment platform." Charles was quiet for a long moment. "How much do you want?" "I want what I'm owed, $6.3 million, covering 19 years of royalties plus interest. That would significantly impact our capital position. Then you should have read your contracts before signing them." He stood up, looked at me with something between respect and resentment. "You know this makes you a lot of enemies. I've been invisible here for 23 years. I think I can handle being unpopular for a few more months." He left without another word. Hour 26. The board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but I knew what they were discussing. Option 1, pay me and absorb the hit. Option 2, fight me in court and risk everything in discovery. Option 3, find some way to make me disappear quietly. They chose option 3. They always do. Initially, hour 32, Madison. My replacement as managing director candidate appeared at my door. She looked nervous. Smart instinct. "Eleanor, I just wanted to say, I had no idea about any of this. Brittany just said the position was available and I don't blame you. Madison, you're not the problem. Is there anything I can do to help? Yes, learn from this. Read every document you sign, and don't trust anyone who gives you a job based on friendship instead of merit." She nodded slowly. "I'm starting to wonder if I made a mistake coming here." "Probably, but it's not too late to build something real. If you survive the next few weeks." She left looking thoughtful. Hour 38. The Hartwell family office called. Not me. They called Charles directly, but voices carry in an investment bank, especially when the CEO starts shouting. From what I could piece together, the Hartwells were very concerned about the situation. If the investment strategy they'd entrusted to us was built on intellectual property that might be disputed, what did that mean for their $68 million mandate? They wanted assurances. They wanted documentation. They wanted a meeting, and they wanted me in the room when it happened. Hour 44. The meeting with the Hartwells. Their team arrived looking like old money usually does. Understated, confident, quietly terrifying. Margaret Hartwell herself, 73 years old, widow of a railroad fortune, worth somewhere north of $400 million and sharp as a surgical blade. Her attorney, her family office manager, her personal CPA, and a young woman I didn't recognize, taking notes. Charles tried to control the narrative. Spent 20 minutes explaining how this was all a misunderstanding, how the clause was probably unenforceable, how Eleanor had gone rogue and was trying to extort the partnership. Margaret let him finish, sipped her tea, then turned to me. Ms. Vance, you developed the Wellington model. Yes. The core methodology is based on research I conducted at the Federal Reserve. I refined and expanded it during my first 5 years at this firm. And this clause in your employment agreement, it gives you ownership rights to that methodology. Perpetual ownership. The firm has an exclusive license to use it commercially, but the intellectual property remains mine. Which means if you left, or if this dispute isn't resolved, we might be invested in a strategy whose underlying methodology is legally contested. That's a possibility, yes. Margaret's attorney leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, let me be direct. The Hartwell family has a $68 million relationship with your firm. That relationship is predicated on confidence in your investment process. If there's any ambiguity about who owns that process, we have a fiduciary obligation to reconsider our position. Charles went pale. Margaret, please. This is one disgruntled employee This is one employee who apparently built your entire investment platform. Margaret interrupted, her voice cool as marble. And instead of paying her what she's owed, you've spent the last 44 hours trying to figure out how to make her go away. She set down her teacup. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to resolve this dispute. You're going to pay Ms. Vance whatever she's legally entitled to, and you're going to do it before our quarterly review meeting in 30 days. Otherwise, I'll be moving my family's assets to a manager with cleaner documentation. She looked at me. Ms. Vance, I assume you'd be willing to confirm the firm's license to your methodology as part of any settlement. Of course. Once I'm fairly compensated, I have no interest in disrupting the business. Sensible. She turned back to Charles. You could learn something from your senior strategist, Charles. She seems to be the only person here who reads what she signs. The Hartwell team left. The silence they left behind was suffocating. Charles sat slumped in his chair. Brittany was trembling. The lawyers were already drafting on their laptops. I stood up. I'll be in my office when you're ready to negotiate in good faith. Walked out. Didn't look back. The settlement negotiations took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of lawyers talking to lawyers. 4 weeks of numbers being thrown like grenades. 4 weeks of Charles Morrison slowly realizing that his midnight signature from 2005 was going to cost him millions. I didn't attend most of the meetings. Didn't need to. My attorney, Patricia Okonkwo, handled everything with surgical precision. She was ex-SEC enforcement. We spoke the same language. They're lowballing you, she reported after week 1, offering $1.2 million to make this go away. Counter with the full amount plus legal fees. Done. Week 2. They've come up to $2.8 million, plus they want a non-disparagement clause and confidentiality agreement. No non-disparagement, no confidentiality beyond standard professional discretion. Full amount. They'll push back. Let them. The Hartwell quarterly review is in 3 weeks. Week 3. They've agreed to $5.1 million, but they want you to resign. No resignation. I stay. Full amount. Plus the managing director title they've denied me 4 times. Silence on the line. Then Patricia laughed. You're not just taking their money. You're taking their power. I'm taking what I earned. The money and the title are both mine. Week 4. Patricia called at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. They've agreed. Everything. $6.3 million. Managing director title. Seat on the investment committee. Equity stake. I was quiet for a moment. They're not fighting anymore. Margaret Hartwell called Charles personally last week, told him that if this wasn't resolved by the quarterly review, she was moving everything to Goldman, $68 million walking out the door. So they're paying me because they have no choice, essentially. But there's more. Brittany Morrison is being removed as Chief People Officer, reassigned to Client Experience Initiatives. And Madison. And what about Madison? She withdrew her candidacy for Managing Director. Said she couldn't work for a firm that treated people this way. Put in her notice yesterday. I hadn't expected that. Madison had seemed like another corporate climber. Maybe I'd misjudged her. When do they want to finalize? Tomorrow morning. They're drafting paperwork tonight. I'll be there. The signing happened in the main conference room, the same room where this whole thing started. Charles Morrison looked like he'd aged a decade in 4 weeks. His daughter wasn't present. Neither were most of the partners. Just Charles, 2 attorneys, Patricia, and me. The documents were substantial. Settlement agreement, revised compensation structure, IP license confirmation, partnership equity grant. I read every page, every clause, every footnote. Nobody rushed me. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. Page 52. The payment schedule. $6,300,000. Paid in 3 installments over 12 months. I signed. Charles signed. Patricia notarized. It was done. Charles cleared his throat. Eleanor, I want you to know, I didn't intend for things to happen this way. 19 years ago, we were just trying to survive. I signed things I shouldn't have, made promises I didn't understand. I looked at him, waited. I'm not apologizing for the contract. You earned what's in that clause. But I am apologizing for the last 4 years. You deserve better than getting passed over for people who hadn't earned it. I appreciate that. Charles? The managing director position, it's yours, officially. If you still want it. I shook my head. I don't want the managing director position. He looked confused. Then what? I want the partner position. Senior partner for investment strategy. Direct report to the investment committee. Voting rights on all major allocation decisions. Charles blinked. We don't have a senior partner for investment strategy. You do now. It's in Section 6 of the revised compensation structure, page 37. He flipped to page 37. Read the clause. Looked at his attorneys. They nodded reluctantly. I didn't catch that. No, you didn't. I stood up, extended my hand. Thank you for the opportunity. Charles, I look forward to a productive partnership. He shook my hand. His grip was weak, the grip of a man who had just lost a negotiation he didn't even know he was in. The aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months. Some of it was public, most of it wasn't. Brittany Morrison was reassigned to Client Experience Initiatives, a fancy title for a windowless office and a job that involved responding to customer complaints. Her apartment renovation budget was quietly canceled. I heard she cried for a week. Then she started interviewing at other firms. Nobody was hiring. Charles stayed as CEO, but something had fundamentally changed. He read contracts now, actually read them. His attorneys said he'd become almost paranoid about documentation. Good. The champagne celebrations disappeared from the trading floor. The selfie-taking slowed down, not because I demanded it, because the culture had shifted. People started taking things seriously, started reading before signing, started asking questions instead of assuming. The junior analyst learned that Eleanor needs to review this meant you'd better have your analysis bulletproof. No exceptions, no shortcuts, no, we'll finalize the details later. The Hartwells renewed their mandate, $68 million for another 5 years, plus a referral to 2 other family offices worth a combined $90 million. Margaret Hartwell sent me a handwritten note and a bottle of very old scotch. To the only person at Archer Wellington who does things properly, let's have lunch. We did, monthly now. Don't talk business much. Talk about estate planning, philanthropy, the foolishness of people who think wealth management is just about returns. You know, Margaret said over lunch one afternoon, I've been working with financial advisors for 40 years, never seen anyone handle a situation that elegantly. The Fed taught me patience. Wall Street taught me precision. She laughed. Lethal combination. Madison reached out 2 months after she resigned, asked if I'd be a reference for her next position. I said yes. Turns out she'd landed at a boutique firm in Boston, senior role, better culture, firm that actually valued her skills instead of her sorority connections. Thank you, she said when she called to tell me, for being honest with me, for showing me what that place really was. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But you saved me years of figuring. She's doing well now. We exchange emails occasionally. Professional, but friendly. Jennifer Park became my senior analyst, promoted from a back office role where she'd been languishing for 6 years. Brilliant quantitative mind that nobody had bothered to notice. Eleanor Bag, she said one afternoon, reviewing a new allocation model. This risk parameter is way too aggressive. One standard deviation event, and we're underwater. Flag it. Send back with revision request. We don't build models that blow up in bad weather. She grinned. Copy that, boss. 6 months after the settlement, I got an email from HR, the new chief people officer, not Brittany. Subject annual review. Compensation confirmation. Hi, Eleanor. Just confirming that your new partnership compensation has been fully processed by the board, all documentation and filed per your specifications. Please let me know if you have any questions. Best regards, Michael Torres, Chief People Officer. I smiled, took a sip of my tea. The expensive loose-leaf blend I now expense to the firm under Executive Wellness Allowance. Hit reply. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your attention to detail. Make sure everything is filed correctly this time. Wouldn't want anything to get lost like before. Eleanor. Close my laptop. The Manhattan skyline glowed golden in the evening light. The Hudson River sparkled in the distance. Same view I'd looked at for 23 years. Different everything else. Fitzgerald was waiting at home, probably judging me for being late again. But even judgmental cats need to be fed. I grabbed my coat, walked past the empty desks on the partner floor, past the conference room where everything had changed, past Brittany's old office, now occupied by someone who actually earned the position. My nameplate was on the door at the end of the hall. Senior partner, investment strategy, had a nice ring to it. The elevator dinged. I stepped inside, hit the button for the lobby. My phone buzzed. Text from my niece Sarah. And Eleanor. Heard about your big promotion. Mom says you're some kind of Wall Street legend now. Can you teach me about investing? I typed back. Here's the first lesson. Always read what you're signing. Everything else is just patience and compound interest. See you Sunday. Sent. The elevator doors opened. Evening rush was winding down, Midtown quieting into night. I walked out onto 6th Avenue, hailed a cab, gave the driver my address. 23 years. 23 years of being overlooked. 23 years of doing the work while other people took the credit. And then one Friday afternoon, email changed everything. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is a dish best served with ironclad documentation and a signature from 2005. The cab pulled up to my building. I paid, tipped well, walked inside. Fitzgerald was waiting by the door, meowing his displeasure at my tardiness. I know. Dinner's coming. Fed the cat. Poured myself a glass of wine. Sat at my piano and played something soft. Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. The piece I always play when I need to think. Somewhere in Midtown. Charles Morrison was probably still at his desk, reading contracts, triple-checking clauses, learning the lesson I'd been trying to teach for 23 years. Read the fine print. It's the only advice that matters. 1 year later. I was in my corner office, the one with the view of the river, the one I'd earned. Contract literacy training had become mandatory for all partners. Guess who designed the curriculum first session? I stood at the front of the conference room, looking at faces that used to ignore me. faces that used to walk past my desk without a glance. Now they took notes. Rule 1, I said, clicking to my first slide. If you can't explain a contract clause to a first-year analyst, you don't understand it well enough to sign it. Murmurs of agreement. Rule 2. When in doubt, ask, your pride isn't worth a lawsuit. More nodding. Rule 3. The person who drafted the contract probably knows it better than you do. Don't assume you're smarter than them. You're probably not. Nervous laughter. Amazing how attentive people become when you've just cost the firm $6 million with a single clause. After the session, Jennifer caught up with me in the hallway. Great presentation, boss. I think you scared some of them. Good. Contracts are serious. Speaking of which, I found something in the new vendor agreement. Page 38, subsection C. What is it? Automatic fee escalation clause tied to AUM growth. They buried it in the definitions section. I smiled. Flag it. We'll address it tomorrow. She nodded and headed back to her desk. Good kid. She was going to be running this department someday. Maybe the whole firm. I walked back to my office, sat in my chair, looked out at the river. 23 years ago, I signed a contract that changed my life. I signed it because I believed in the opportunity, believed in the potential, believed that if I worked hard enough, the firm would reward me. I was wrong about the reward, but I was right about one thing. I believed in myself, believed in my skills, believed that someday, somehow, the work would matter. It did. Not in the way they expected, not in the way I expected, but it mattered. $6.3 million mattered. A corner office mattered. Being heard, finally. After 23 years of silence, that mattered most of all. They say the devil is in the details. They're wrong. The devil is the woman who reads the details. And she just made partner. Thanks for staying until the end. If you made it this far, if you enjoyed watching Wall Street executives learn the hard way about reading contracts, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who's ever been passed over, someone who's ever been dismissed, someone who's ever been told they weren't client-facing material by people who couldn't analyze their way out of a spreadsheet. Tell them to read every document. Tell them to keep every record. Tell them to wait for the right moment. And remind them that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a clause on page 11, Article 4, Section 7, hiding in plain sight, compounding quietly, waiting to be read. See you in the next one.